After rebirth, she entered a cursed novel, and the Japanese Yakuza boss already knew her name. The moment you wake up, you know something is impossible. Not wrong, impossible, because the bedroom ceiling above you has been painted in the exact shade of grey that the author described in Chapter 3, the one you read in your previous life, in a coffee shop in Tokyo, on a Tuesday afternoon, in the year 2018. You remember the words exactly. You remember sitting on the velvet chair, your cold tea growing cold beside you, and thinking with the kind of hollow certainty that comes from reading something true. This novel is too dark. This novel hurts, and now you are living inside it, breathing its air, and the rain outside sounds exactly like the rain that falls on page 47, the rain that changes everything for the heroine, the rain that begins her descent into the curse. Your hands are trembling. Your heart is a strange, unfamiliar drum inside your chest. Your name is Akane now, or it is in this life, in this world, in this story that you somehow entered without knowing how to say goodbye to the person you were before. In your first life, you had a different name, a name that belonged to a person who worked at a publishing house, who commuted on crowded trains, who read novels in small cafes on Tuesdays, who believed that stories were always safe because they could be closed and put away and forgotten. You were ordinary. You were safe. Then came the car accident, the one you barely remember, just the sound of breaking glass and the sensation of falling, of the world tilting sideways, of something shattering into 1,000 pieces. And then came this, waking up inside a story you've already read, already analyzed, already mourned for, already wept through in the pages of a worn paperback. The novel you're living in is called The Curse of Yamashita. You read it only once in that coffee shop years ago, but it imprinted itself on your mind like a photograph pressed against your skin. It was written by an author whose name you can barely remember now, published by a small press that has long since gone out of business. It was the kind of book that appears in your life at exactly the wrong moment, the kind of book that knows too much about loneliness, about being trapped, about the beautiful ways that fate can destroy a person from the inside out. The author never explained how the curse worked. That's the thing that kept you awake in the evenings when you first read it. The thing that keeps you awake now. The curse is never fully revealed. It's just there, humming under the surface of the narrative like a wound that never heals, spreading through the lives of everyone who enters this world, touching them with fingers of ice and shadow, reminding them that they are not free. The protagonist in the novel, the original version of you suppose, is destroyed by the curse. She falls in love with the wrong man, or the right man at the wrong time, and by the final chapters, she has lost everything. Her sanity, her safety, her future. The author wrote her ending with a kind of beautiful cruelty, making it feel inevitable, making it feel like fate rather than story, making it feel like the only possible conclusion to a narrative that was already being written before she was even born. You remember weeping when you read those final pages. Remember feeling the weight of inevitability crushing down on you like a stone. Remember understanding that some stories are written to break you, not to save you. Sans now you understand that you weren't just experiencing emotion. You were experiencing prophecy, but you know the ending. You've read it. You've lived it in your mind. Every scene, every dialogue, every moment of devastating choice, it's all there in your memory. Perfect and pristine and completely, utterly predetermined. That knowledge becomes your curse. And your only weapon, the thing that might save you and the thing that might destroy you just as thoroughly as the original story destroyed the heroine before you. It's a knife with two edges, and you're learning day by day which edge cuts deeper. The house you live in now belongs to your uncle, a man with soft eyes and a distant way of speaking, as if he's already somewhere else, already thinking of something you can never reach, already aware on some level that he's living inside a story that doesn't belong to him. He tells you on the first morning after you arrive that you should stay inside most days. The outside world, he says, is not always kind to women who are alone. The outside world is dangerous. The outside world has teeth. You nod, playing the part of the confused niece who's just arrived from the countryside, though you are living a performance so intricate, so layered, that sometimes you forget what's underneath the mask. Forget who you were before this began. Forget the taste of coffee in that cafe. On your third day in the house, restlessness overtakes caution, and you go to the market despite his warning. You walk through the neighborhood in the golden afternoon light, and you are careful. You are so careful, moving through the streets like a ghost, trying not to disturb the world, like someone who knows that every step she takes can alter the trajectory of her own fate. Because on page 91, the heroine of the novel goes to the market and is followed by a man in a dark coat. That man is the beginning of everything. The beginning of the curse, the beginning of the love that destroys her, the beginning of the fate that no one can escape, the catalyst that sets the entire tragic machinery in motion. So when you see the man in the dark coat appear at the corner of Yamashita Street, his silhouette sharp against the afternoon, you turn and walk in the opposite direction. Your heart hammers, your hands shake. You've already changed something. You've already deviated from the script. That's when you see him. He stands in front of a traditional restaurant with white curtains, dressed in an expensive suit that fits his shoulders like it was made for him alone, like the suit itself is a work of art commissioned to frame this particular man. His face is sharp, sharp cheekbones, sharp eyes, sharp intelligence in every line of his features, but it's his eyes that stop you where you stand. His eyes contain a recognition that should be impossible, that defies logic, that makes your breath catch in your throat. He looks at you across the street, across the distance between where he is and where you are standing, frozen, and his expression changes. It's small, just the faintest shift in the muscles around his eyes, a subtle rearrangement of shadows, but you see it. You see him see you and you see him know you. And then he does something that makes your heart stop, makes time seem to bend and fold in on itself, makes the world spin slightly on its axis. He says, your name. Not your name now, not the carefully constructed identity of Akane that you've been learning to embody in this new life. Your real name, the one from your first life, the one that belonged to a girl who worked in a publishing house and drank cold tea in cafes and believed that stories could be safely contained within pages. The name that no one in this world should know, the name that you've buried so deep inside yourself that sometimes you wonder if it's even real anymore. He calls across the street with absolute certainty, and there is nothing in his voice but knowledge, nothing but the absolute understanding of someone who has been waiting for this exact moment for a very long time. Your real name on his lips is like a bell tolling. It echoes through you, as if he's been waiting for you all along, as if he knows exactly who you are. You run. Your feet carry you through the streets without your conscious permission, down alleys you didn't know existed, through neighborhoods that seem to shift and change as you move through them. Your breath comes in sharp gasps. Your mind spirals. It's impossible. It's completely impossible. No one in this world should know anything about your previous life, about the name you carried before the accident, before the death that wasn't quite death, before the rebirth that brought you here. There are no records. There are no traces. There is no way, no logical way, for anyone to have learned what name you once owned. But he knew. He called it across the street like it belonged to him, like he had earned it, like he had been waiting for permission to speak it for 1,000 years. And yet, he knew. Later, sitting in the garden of your uncle's house, surrounded by carefully tended flowers, and the sound of evening insects, you cannot explain what happened, even to yourself. The Yakuza Boss, because that's who he is. You know this from the novel. You know his entire history from the pages you've read. Knows your name. He knows your real name. The implications of this spiral outward in your mind, touching everything, threatening to destabilize the small bit of certainty you've managed to construct in this world. You've read the scenes where he appears. You know his motivations, or what the author claimed were his motivations. But the author never explained this. The author never explained how he could possibly know. That night, you take out the novel from beneath your mattress, where you've hidden it like a secret, like a weapon, like a forbidden text that might burn your fingers. You've read it so many times in your first life that you've memorized entire passages, entire scenes, entire character arcs. Your fingers know the curve of the pages. Your eyes know exactly where certain lines appear. You flip through the manuscript with shaking hands, searching for any mention of this moment, any explanation for how he could possibly know. The pages blur under your eyes. The story that once felt so complete, so finished, so inevitable, now feels fragmented, incomplete, like there's something written in invisible ink between the lines, like there's an entire world of meaning existing in the spaces between the words. On page 123 you find it, a single paragraph that you somehow missed or misremembered or didn't fully understand until now. He knew her name before she knew his. He knew her the way people sometimes know things that haven't been explained to them, the way you know you're falling before you hit the ground. He knew her like he'd been waiting for her across 1,000 years, across 1,000 worlds, across every version of the story that had ever been written. Recognition cut through him like a blade, sharp and clean and completely devastating. That's all the author wrote. That's all she gave you. And it's not enough. It's never enough. It doesn't explain why, doesn't explain how, doesn't explain anything except that this moment was always supposed to happen, which means you haven't deviated from the story at all. You've been following it perfectly. You've been dancing exactly the steps that the author choreographed for you. Maybe there is no escape. Maybe there never was. The next day, he's waiting outside your uncle's house. You see him from the second-floor window, standing with his hands in his pockets, dressed again in that expensive suit, looking like a man who belongs in this world in a way that most people don't. He looks patient. He looks like someone who can wait forever. Your instinct is to hide, to disappear, to become invisible the way you've been practicing since you arrived in this world, the way the heroine tries and fails to do in the novel. But something stops you, something dangerous and foolish and entirely human, entirely your own. You want to know, you want to ask him a question that would make you sound insane, a question that presupposes things that shouldn't be possible. And more than that, you want him to answer. You want proof that all of this is real. So you go downstairs, your hands trembling slightly, your mind racing with questions and fears and desperate hope. You walk out into the afternoon, into the presence of this man who knows impossible things. You stand across from him with the garden wall between you, and the space between you feels charged, electric, like something is about to break or transform or crack open the world. You don't know me, you say. Your voice is steadier than you expected. Yes, I do, he replies. His voice is calm, patient, the voice of someone who has been waiting a very long time for you to catch up, for you to understand, for you to see what he's already seen. I've been waiting for you to appear in this world. Not for a day or a month, for years. Since before the curse took hold, I've been waiting, watching for the one thing that might break the pattern. Watching for you. You're the variable I've never been able to account for. You're the answer I've been praying to find. That's impossible. You grip the wall. The stone is cool and real beneath your palms, grounding you. Is it? He moves closer to the wall, and his suit catches the afternoon light. It's pristine, perfect, the kind of suit that speaks of power and money, and the kind of authority that doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard. You know this world already. You know what's going to happen here. You know the events that are about to unfold. How is that possible if you've never been here before? How is that possible if you're just a girl who arrived from the countryside? You're not confused by anything you see. You're moving through this world like someone reading a map that no one else can see. Your mouth goes dry. This is it. This is the moment where everything becomes real, becomes undeniable. I don't know what you're talking about, you say, but the words are hollow, even to your own ears. Yes, you do. He's closer now, closer to the wall, close enough that you can see the texture of his eyes, the dark concentration in them, the sadness that lives behind the authority like a creature that's been caged for far too long. You've read the story. You've lived through the ending already in your mind again and again. You've read it so many times that the words live in your bones. You know how this ends for the heroine. You know what happens to the man she loves. You know the curse, and you know that it's inescapable. You know because you're not just any girl. You're a girl who died in another world and woke up inside a story. You don't answer. You can't answer, because acknowledging what he's saying would be like acknowledging that this is real, that you really did die in one world and wake in another, that the boundaries between story and life are not as solid as you've always believed them to be, that the things you read in books might have the power to shape reality. It would be like admitting that none of this has ever made sense, and that your confusion is not a sign of madness, but a sign of your awakening. I'm in the novel, you whisper finally. The words feel dangerous, heretical, like they might shatter something fundamental about the world. So am I, he says, and his voice carries a weight that you can almost feel, a heaviness that suggests centuries of knowledge, eons of waiting. And unlike everyone else in this world, I remember every version of the story. I've lived through the ending countless times. I've died countless times. I've died in every possible way. I'm the one who's cursed Akane. I'm the one who dies in every version of the narrative. I'm the one who watches you choose the wrong fate over and over, because you don't know that you have a choice at all. The curse keeps you trapped in a loop of inevitability, and I keep waiting for someone, anyone, to break that loop. The world seems to tilt. The novel, the one you read, the one you have hidden under your mattress like forbidden knowledge, describes the Yakuza boss as a villain, a beautiful, terrible man who brings destruction wherever he goes, who corrupts everything he touches, who is fundamentally incapable of anything but violence and darkness. The author wrote him as the curse itself, as the force that destroys the heroine, as the embodiment of all the dangerous things that can happen when a woman allows herself to love without wisdom. But that's not what you see when you look at him now. What you see is someone who has lived through the ending of his own story so many times that it's worn him down to something almost gentle, almost desperate, almost human in a way that villains aren't supposed to be. "You want me to change the ending," you say slowly. "I want you to choose," he says. "I want you to choose from a place of knowledge, not from blindness. I want you to understand that you have agency, that the story can be rewritten, that fate is not as fixed as we've been taught to believe. What you do with that choice, that's up to you. But you'll choose from a place of power. That's more than anyone else in this world gets. That's more than I ever got." He turns and walks away before you can respond, disappearing into the afternoon traffic, leaving you standing alone with the wall between you and the rest of the world, a wall that suddenly feels very thin, very fragile, like it might dissolve if you pressed against it hard enough. You don't see him for 3 days after that conversation. You spend those 3 days rereading the novel, searching for clues, for explanations, for anything that might tell you whether this is real or whether you've finally lost your mind completely. The pages blur under your eyes. The story that once felt like a complete, finished thing, the kind of narrative that has a beginning, a middle, and an inevitable ending, now feels like it's written in invisible ink, with secrets hiding between the lines, with depths that you're only beginning to perceive. You start to notice things that you missed before, inconsistencies in the narrative, strange gaps where explanation should be, sentences that seem to suggest a larger world beyond what the author actually described. It's as if the author was hiding something, as if she knew more than she could possibly write. Your uncle notices you're distracted. He asks if you're unwell, if the food disagrees with you, if the weather is too warm. You tell him you're fine, just adjusting, just learning the rhythm of this place, just acclimating to a life that isn't quite real, but feels real enough. He nods, but his eyes hold something you haven't seen before, a kind of knowing, a kind of sadness. And you wonder, not for the first time, whether the people in this world have their own awareness of the curse, their own sense of living inside a story that was written long before they were born, their own feeling of being puppets dancing on strings that are almost, but not quite, invisible. On the 4th day there is a message. It comes through a woman who appears at the market, someone you don't recognize, someone whose face is unremarkable, someone who seems designed to be forgotten. She approaches you while you're buying flowers, white flowers, the kind that appear in the novel, and she presses a white envelope into your hand. The envelope is heavy, expensive, the kind of envelope that costs money. She disappears into the crowd before you can ask her anything, dissolving back into the afternoon like she was never there at all, like she was a figment, a ghost, a character in your story, rather than a person in the world. Inside the envelope is a single piece of paper, and on it, written in careful handwriting that suggests both elegance and danger, is an address and a time. Tomorrow night. Come alone. The address is for a restaurant in the old district, the kind of place where powerful men conduct business outside the law. The time is 9 o'clock in the evening, the hour when the city transforms from ordinary day into something darker, something more complex. You stand in the market, the envelope in your hand, and you understand that this is the moment. This is the one where the heroine in the original novel makes the choice that seals her fate. This is the moment where she decides to trust the Yakuza boss, despite everything she's read about him, despite everything the story has told her about who he is, despite every instinct of self-preservation that her body is screaming at her. In the novel, she goes to meet him. In the novel, she chooses passion over safety, chooses fate over free will, chooses destiny over the possibility of escape. And the curse harvests that choice like a crop of blood, like a harvest of souls, like the payment that was always meant to be made. But you're not the heroine anymore. You're someone who has lived another life, someone who has had the gift and the curse of reading the ending before you lived it. You have knowledge that could save you, or it could be the very thing that destroys you, because the novel was written before you made any of these choices, and if you're truly caught in a cursed story, then maybe changing anything is impossible. Maybe the ending is already written into the fabric of reality, and the only thing you're choosing is how slowly you walk toward it, how much pain you experience along the way, how completely you surrender to inevitability. You go. The restaurant is empty when you arrive, cleared of other patrons, secured behind locked doors and darkened windows. He's waiting for you in a private room upstairs, sitting at a low table with tea already steaming in 2 cups. The tea is green and fragrant, and you realize he prepared it knowing you would come, knowing you would choose this moment, knowing what decision you would make before you made it. He looks up when you enter, and his expression is something close to relief, something close to the expression of a man who has been holding his breath for a very long time and finally feels permitted to exhale. "You came," he says. "It's not a question." "I don't understand any of this," you reply. You don't sit. You stand in the doorway like you might bolt at any moment, like your muscles are coiled and ready to run. "I don't understand how you know me, or how this is possible, or why you're telling me any of this. In the novel you barely speak to her, you barely explain anything, she just—" You stop. You can't finish the sentence. The words stick in your throat like something that refuses to be swallowed. "She just falls," he says quietly. His voice is gentle, almost kind. "She falls in love without knowing why, and the curse takes that love and turns it into a weapon. The curse transforms her greatest strength, her capacity to love, her ability to trust, her willingness to be vulnerable, into the instrument of her own destruction. By the time she realizes what's happening, by the time she understands the true nature of the curse, it's too late. She's already bound to this world, to me, to the fate that was written for her before she was even born. So how is this different?" Your voice shakes. Your hands shake. Everything inside you is trembling with the weight of what this conversation means. How is anything different if I'm still here, if the curse is still here, if the ending is still waiting for me like an animal waiting for its prey? He stands and walks to the window. Outside, the city glitters in the evening light, full of lights and movement and lives being lived by people who don't know that they're living inside a story. Somewhere in that city, the original story is still playing out, still unfolding, still moving toward its inevitable conclusion like a river flowing toward the sea. "What if the curse isn't about what happens to you," he says slowly, "but about what you know? What if being trapped in a story isn't the curse? What if the curse is believing that you have no agency within that story? What if every version of you that's ever lived this ending has believed so completely in the inevitability of it that you've never actually tried to change it? The curse doesn't have power unless you surrender to it. The curse only works if you accept the narrative that was written for you." You feel something crack inside your chest. It's a small crack, barely perceptible, but it spreads. That's not fair. The story is written. It exists on pages. How can you change something that's already been written? How can you rewrite a book that's already been published? "Stories aren't as fixed as you think," he says, and he turns to face you. His eyes hold something that makes your breath catch. Hope. Real hope. Genuine belief that change is possible. The author thought she wrote an ending, but the author never accounted for someone reading her story and then living inside it. The author never imagined that the heroine might have knowledge of her own fate. The author never considered the possibility that a character might become conscious of her own narrative and decide to rebel against it. That changes everything, Akane. That changes the shape of what's possible. You're not the heroine the author wrote. You're someone new. You're someone who has transcended the story. You don't know whether to believe him. You don't know if this is the story being kind to you or the story playing the cruelest trick of all, giving you hope so that when everything falls apart, it will hurt more than it ever hurt before. But something in his eyes, something in the way he's looking at you, like you're the answer to a question he's been asking for a very long time, like you're the only person in existence who might be able to break him free from the cage of his own narrative, makes you want to try. What happens if we change it, you ask? What happens to the curse? What happens to you? What happens to me? "I don't know," he says, and you believe him because his honesty costs him something. You can see it in the way his shoulders tighten, in the way his hands clench into fists and then release again. "But I know what happens if we don't. I've lived that ending. I'll live it again, unless something breaks the pattern, and I can't break it alone. I need you to choose differently. I need you to make a choice that the original heroine never made, a choice that the author never wrote for you, a choice that comes from your own will rather than from the narrative that was written to contain you. That night, you make a choice, not the one the novel wrote for you, not the one that leads to destruction and fate and the beautiful, terrible ending that you've read so many times it lives in your cells, that has become a part of your DNA. You choose to trust him, not because the story tells you to, but because you've read the ending and you understand, finally, what it means to want something badly enough to fight for it, even when fighting seems impossible, even when the enemy is the nature of reality itself. What you don't expect is what comes next. On the 7th night after you begin meeting with him in secret, in rooms hidden from the world, in moments that feel stolen from the narrative itself, the man in the dark coat appears, just like the novel said he would, just like the script demands. He follows you through the streets, and his presence sends a chill down your spine, because everything is unfolding exactly as it did in the pages you've memorized. This is the moment where the heroine's fate is supposed to deepen, where the curse is supposed to tighten its grip, where the machinery of inevitability is supposed to click into place. This is the moment where everything spirals toward the ending that you've read, that you've feared, that you've been trying so desperately to prevent. You tell the Yakuza boss about the man in the dark coat. You expect him to tell you to hide, to stay inside, to accept the inevitability of it, to surrender to the fate that has been written. Instead, he takes your hand and tells you something that changes everything. The man in the dark coat isn't a weapon of the curse, he says quietly. He's the author's creation, yes, but he's not what forces the ending. The curse doesn't require him. The curse requires you to believe that you're powerless. That's the real magic that holds this world together. Not fate, belief. The author was brilliant, but she was also trapped in her own way. She believed that the world works according to the rules of tragedy, according to the laws of inevitability, and so she wrote a world that mirrors that belief. But beliefs can change, Akane. Worlds can transform. Your hands shake. So what do we do? How do we stop him? How do we prevent the ending? We stop believing, he says simply. His voice is calm and steady and absolutely certain. We walk out of the story we know and into the one we're going to write. It's terrifying. The ending is unknown. There are no pages left to read. There's no narrative to guide us. But at least it's ours. At least it comes from choice rather than from fate. The next morning, you don't hide. You don't cower. You don't accept the pattern that the novel has written for you. You walk through the city in daylight, in full view of everyone, and the man in the dark coat follows. But instead of running, instead of accepting the pattern, instead of moving toward the ending that has been written for you, you turn and face him. And what you see in his expression is confusion because you're doing something no version of the heroine has ever done before. You're deviating from the script. You're writing yourself a new ending, and he can't follow you there. The curse doesn't break all at once. It breaks like ice cracking in spring, in pieces, in moments, in sudden shifts that you feel but don't always understand. Your uncle stops avoiding your eyes and begins to see you, really see you, for the first time since you arrived. The neighborhood around you seems to shift, to become less like a setting and more like a real place, full of people with their own stories, their own fates, their own agency, their own capacity for choice and change. The novel beneath your mattress remains, but you stop reading it. You stop using it as a map. You let it become just what it always was, a story someone wrote, a narrative someone imagined, a prophecy that you have the power to refuse. The Yakuza boss changes too. As the curse loosens its grip, as the narrative begins to release him, you begin to understand him not as the villain the author made him into, but as a man who was trapped in a story and refused to stop fighting for a version of the ending where he could be something other than a beautiful, terrible fate, something other than a force of destruction, something other than the instrument of someone else's destruction. He's still dangerous. He's still someone who operates in darkness and deals in power and commands respect through the sheer force of his will. But he's also someone who chose you, who waited for you, who believed that the story could be rewritten even when belief seemed impossible. 3 months after you arrived in this world, you're sitting in the garden of a house that isn't your uncle's anymore. It's yours, or yours together. You haven't quite decided how to describe it yet. The boundaries between before and after have become blurred, nearly indistinguishable. You're still in the novel, still living inside the world that the author created, but you're no longer trapped in it. You're living in it the way a reader lives inside a book, consciously, deliberately, with full awareness of what's happening and full permission to interpret it however you choose. The curse is still there. You can feel it sometimes, like an old wound, like something that happened to someone else, like a story you read in another lifetime, but it no longer controls you. He finds you in the garden one evening, as the sun is setting, as the world is turning golden and soft and impossibly beautiful. He sits beside you, and he takes your hand, and you think about all the versions of this moment that exist in the novel, all the ways the author imagined this scene, all the darkness she wrote into this meeting between the heroine and the man she loves. You think about how the author imagined this moment as a tragedy, as the beginning of the end, as the moment where fate claims another victim. And then you think about how none of that matters anymore, because this is your moment now, real and unscripted, and absolutely yours. Do you regret it? He asks. His voice is gentle. His hand is warm in yours. Do you regret choosing this instead of following the story? Do you regret choosing the unknown? You lean your head against his shoulder. The gesture feels both new and ancient, both terrifying and perfectly right. No, you say. The story was beautifully written. It was tragic and moving and perfectly constructed. But beauty without choice is just a prison with pretty walls. I choose this. I choose the unknown. I choose you. I choose a life that wasn't written for me. He's quiet for a long moment. The evening deepens around you. The world transforms slowly from golden to purple to blue. And then he says something that you'll remember for the rest of your life, something that explains everything about why he fought so hard to make you see that the story could be changed, why he waited so long for someone who could break the pattern. I've been cursed for a very long time. I've lived the same ending so many times that I could recite the dialogue in my sleep. It took another person stepping into the curse to teach me that the curse was never about fate. It was about forgetting that we have the power to write our own endings. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for choosing. Thank you for being brave enough to become something the author never imagined. The rain begins to fall. It sounds different now, not like something from the novel, not like a literary device, not like a narrative technique designed to evoke emotion. It sounds like real rain, like weather, like a natural thing moving through a real world. You sit together and watch it fall, and you understand finally what it means to be alive within a story while writing something completely new. What it means to read the ending and then choose to ignore it. What it means to love someone so much that you're willing to rewrite the entire universe for them. The curse doesn't disappear entirely, but it transforms. It becomes less like a weapon and more like a history, something that happened, something you survived, something that made you stronger and wiser and more fully yourself. And sometimes, late at night, you take out the novel and you read a few pages and you're amazed by how different the story seems now that you're no longer trapped in it. The words are the same. The narrative is unchanged, but you are not the same. You've become something the author never imagined, a character who escaped her own narrative and wrote herself a life that could only be described as truly, impossibly, beautifully her own. This is a fictional narrative. All images and videos were generated by artificial intelligence for entertainment purposes.